am particularly happy to be the first to present this very important subject. And I am more happy that the Institute of Ismaili Studies has accepted to start a reflection here in this institute on a problem which is a problem of civilization concerning all people, our contemporary people. It concerns also the past, because the concept of civil society, of course, we may say that it is born in European historical space, but there is no society deprived of a civic space where people live. So the concept of civic society has been only more elaborated, more defined in a very pragmatic way, as we shall see, in Europe. But I think it would be a mistake to say that the concept of civil society exists only in Europe, and we are going to see what Europe did to achieve what it did achieve for this, for enhancing this possibility of having a space of citizenship, a space for freedom, etc., with a rule of law, and trying to see what can we do in Muslim countries to not do the same exactly, but to enjoy, we too, the benefits of what we call civil society. To locate this concept, first of all, I am happy with the title too, Civil Society in Comparative Muslim Contexts. I am fighting since many years to speak about Muslim context and not Islam. The word Islam has become so controversial. It is used by so many people in different ways that it is not a concept which we can work so that we can clarify all the problems raised not only about civil society but also about religion and the nature of religion, the function of religion. So we have to look to concrete historical, sociological contexts where there is Islam, but not only Islam. If we take, for example, Indonesian society, it is not right to describe all this society with the word Islam only. There are many contexts where we have many languages, many cultural backgrounds, which might have some references to Islam, with more or less knowledge of what Islam is, for example, theologically, but we cannot present all this under the word Islam only. And even with Ismaili community, there are in Ismaili community cultural groups with many languages, with many historical backgrounds, although they belong to the same reference, which is the Ismaili way of practicing Islam. Nevertheless, we have to look in particular to all the context. So this is very important to approach it like this and to approach it in a comparative way so that we can learn more. Now, to locate the concept itself, I would like to start from a concrete example. The European Union has voted in September a new Declaration of Human Rights, which is a European Declaration of Human Rights. This means that a civil society is always in the process of redefinition, to adapt it to new demands emerging in the societies. European societies have new demands. coming from all the populations which migrated to Europe since the last 60s, and which are raising new problems which Europe thought that it had solved already for these problems, especially the problem of religion. The problem of religion is coming back in European societies after a long time, since 18th, 19th century, when European thought that the question of religion was solved with the separation between the church and the state. And at the end of the century, because of these changes which are happening in European space, Europeans are obliged to reconsider the issue of religion. So this gives us an idea of the necessity to rework always the concept of civil society, because changes are always happening in the civic society. Another aspect of this example is that the members of European Community wanted to introduce in the preamble of this declaration, there is always a preamble like in the Constitution, that Europe has a religious legacy. They wanted to do this. They are 50 to discuss and to agree. France said no, we cannot put this in the preamble. Because if we put this in the preamble, we are going to introduce again contradictory positions among all the religions existing in European societies. Because this preamble would refer essentially to Christianity, which has been, of course, the religion which supported, enlightened, guided European societies up to 20th century, although there has been this secularization of the societies. So you see here, the debate about religion and secularism is still on. In Europe, I'm speaking on Europe, I'm not speaking on Muslim countries, we shall come to it. Is still on, still not solved. And finally, the declaration didn't mention the religious legacy of the European Union, you see. And they didn't, they agreed, because they recognized that there is now a multicultural societies in Europe, with multiple religions existing in Europe, and it would be dangerous to raise this issue by referring only to Christianity. So you see, you have here an example of how empirically civil society is built through the realities, the new realities occurring in the society. This means also that the civil society is a work ahead of us. It's not given, even for Europeans. Now, we, in the Islamic context, we have, of course, special difficulties to go through not only the concept, but the implementation of a civil society in Muslim context. Because Islam as a religion didn't have the same historical evolution as Christianity. Christianity has been exposed since the 16th century to the challenges of modern reason. So Christians had to cope with the scientific challenges and the intellectual challenges which have been introduced in the debate about how to build a civil society in European societies. And they are discussing, debating, and struggling, shedding blood for the issue. I remind you that here in England, Cromwell condemned Charles I, and they killed Charles I. They killed the symbol, the political symbol, representing a divine law. And they wanted to conquer the freedom to reflect on which law we have to give to the society. Which kind of law? And you see here a big debate. It was in the 17th century. French did more, because in England they didn't suppress monarchy. Monarchy is still there, but the queen or the king has no power, political power. It is a symbol only. French have killed also Louis XVI, and they have established a republic. They suppressed totally the monarchy, even as a symbol. This shows you also the dimensions of the debate, of getting to several kinds or several levels of civil society. Civil society as it works in England is different from civil society as it works in France. And it has philosophical stakes behind. And when we look to this from outside, if we do not understand this historical evolution and this struggle, not only an intellectual struggle, but a political struggle shedding even blood for it, like it is shed in Algeria, for the same reasons, by the way, because in Algeria they are fighting exactly for this. We have Algerians who would like to introduce a secular conception of the space of citizenship, and we have others who want to reintroduce or re-enhance the Islamic model in Algeria. Comparing what has happened in Europe to what has happened in Islam, to understand the stakes. I remind you that Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab has been killed. The Caliph Uthman has been killed. The Caliph Ali ibn Abi Talib has been killed. They were also symbols of authority and political power. But these events, which are so important in the history of Islamic model of building a society, didn't produce the same results which have been produced in Europe. Of course, the cultural context, the intellectual context are totally different. We are in Arabia, in a society where we have a tribal society functioning with the tribal solidarities. It is totally different. But Islamic tradition, instead of reflecting about these events, 3 caliphs have been killed. What they did, they have built symbolic, mythical figures of Umar, of Uthman, and Ali. They became the models of Islamic authority for Sunni Islam. And Ali became the model for Shia Islam. But this is what we call in anthropology the mythical transfiguration of a person to become the symbol of the highest authority. And we are still living on this mythical construction of 3 figures or 4 figures, what the Sunnis call the right-guided caliphs, with the split with the Shia, as you know, but the system is the same, the process is the same. The problem is that we are still living on this, because so far, as Muslims, we did not yet address the problem of authority and power as it has been addressed in European history, because in Europe, philosophers have prepared the background, the intellectual background, to support the political revolution and the construction of the civil society. We have Hobbes, we have Hume, we have Locke, we have Rousseau, we have Voltaire. All these people have thought about the problem. And those who made the political revolution took these issues from the reflections given by the philosophers, and you see how the intellectual endeavor has supported the political action to implement a civil society as it has been implemented in Europe. But in Islam, unfortunately, we could not do this. I have to run because I want to show you the complexity through which Muslim societies have to go today to develop a culture, a new culture for a civil society. That's why I said it is a work ahead of us for Muslim societies. In Europe, indeed, there is also a work ahead of us, but for Muslims, I think there is even more work to do, and to see the complexity, we shall now just give a look to this diagram.
Is this clearly visible at the back?
Very shortly. This diagram shows 8 forces operating in each society. The most ancient society, the tribal society, to the most complex and sophisticated society. You can take United States, Canada, France, whatever. This diagram translates and shows the complexity of the struggles through which we have to go to conquer a new possibility to implement a civil society with a rule of law, because we cannot have a civil society without a rule of law. They go together. You cannot separate it. These 3 forces are represented on 2 lines. One line up, one line down. And this vertical representation represents the balance of forces operating in the society. The forces on the first line are the forces related to the state formation. The state is not given either. It has a history. In Medina, we didn't have a state. The first state which emerged and took importance and became even an imperial state was with the Umayyad state. And the state, when it emerges, it has 3 forces operating with the state, in solidarity with the state. We have writing, we have learned elite, like the theologians, like the jurists, who built a law, who built a code for the state so that the state is unified and can run the society with this law. And we have what we call orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is related to the state, because orthodoxy is a way to exercise power in the society, to command the society. Orthodoxy is not only a religious concept. It is, in its deepest, it is a political concept. It is meant to organize the society according to the vision that the state has of which society is going to build for to maintain its legitimacy. And when I say orthodoxy, also, the concept of orthodoxy is extremely important. If we mention, for example, French Republic, which is the result of the French Revolution, there is an orthodoxy in political definition of the French Republic. And this orthodoxy, you heard that the Minister of Interior in France has resigned from his office about Corse, because he maintained that if we give an autonomy to the Corse, we will break the Republic. He didn't agree. So you see how the debate about orthodoxy is not only religious, we find it also in a secularized context. Because it is a political debate, not only a religious debate. So I'm giving the definition of civil society. To not oppose, as we do, secularism to religion. This is a wrong approach of secularism and a wrong approach of religion. We should stop thinking that any secularism is hostile to religion, is meant to destroy religion. And religion, in response to defend itself, it refuses any move towards secularism, what is called secularism. This is a political, ideological way to deal with secularism and religion. There is another way to deal with it, to understand what is happening on the first line and now on the second line. The second line concerns all contemporary Muslim societies. Because in Muslim societies, a writing, learned culture is not as spread as it is in European societies. We have still in Muslim societies what anthropologists call the segmentary societies, based on tribal solidarities, based on oral culture, not written culture. And there has been always through history an opposition between the segmentary societies, which is the majority of the population, and the elites, which have reached the level of the official state. That's why we have also a functional solidarity between segmentary societies, orality as a stage in the evolution of culture, popular and populist culture. I have no time to elaborate on all this. There is a difference between popular and populist culture, especially today. We are working in the societies, Muslim societies today, where sociologically the populist culture is stronger because it is based on the larger masses population than the elites which are living in the cities, etc. So the expression of Islam today is more the expression of the populist culture than the expression of the learned elites. That's why it is so difficult to introduce the concept, the modern concept of civil society in contemporary societies. Because the sociological pressure of the populist culture is more powerful than the influence of the small elites that we have in Muslim societies who can speak, like we do, for example, here, about civil society, what it is, etc. This population cannot follow such a discussion. They didn't receive the necessary culture to follow such a discussion. In that sense, building a civil society requires a culture, requires a training, requires a system of education to prepare people to be the citizens of a civil society. There is no way to have access to civil society if you do not have an appropriate system of education, explaining how, like I did now, how the concept of civil society evolved through culture, through the work of intellectuals, and has been translated into a new law, into a rule of law, etc., etc. And this system of education, we are still lacking in Muslim context. And I think we can say that in the Ismaili community, it is still lacking. And if we want to go ahead for this project of introducing a culture for civil society, we have to think, to change, to improve, and we are of course thinking about it, how to introduce a system of education to prepare people as actors of a civil society. Heterodoxy. Look, here you can understand very well the opposition between orthodoxy and heterodoxy. How Sunni Muslims look to Ismailis? What makes Sunni Muslims looking to Ismailis as heterodox, not good Muslims? And themselves, they call themselves Orthodox Muslims. How this came to exist and to work in the societies as it does and as it did. And you know that the Fatimid came to power through political oppositions, not only theological debate. So you see the complexity here of the necessity to develop a new paradigm about the function of religion and the function of secularized law in a society, to transform the space of civil society which is based on religious belonging. This is an Ismaili, this is an Imami, this is a Catholic, this is etc. To replace this by a modern definition of citizenship. You can be what you want from the point of view of religion, but you are first a citizen. And I have not the right to ask you and to write on your identity card that you are a Muslim or you are a Protestant or you are a Jew or you are. You see the shift here. It is extremely important. This translates what the concept of citizen, the modern concept of citizenship. And this modern concept is also a conquest. It has been conquered politically through bloody struggle. Because the church in Europe didn't agree to move from a space dominated by a Christian definition of citizenship to a legal, modern, neutral definition of citizenship, which doesn't mean that I shall control your belonging to Christianity, your belonging to Buddhism, your belonging. This is not my problem in the state. That's why religious belonging becomes, in the civil society, a private decision, not a public decision. And here in the civil society we have a debate. Because the rule of law, modern rule of law, guarantees your freedom to believe, guarantees your freedom to have religious convictions. But when you come to manifest publicly that you are a Muslim, like we had with girls going to school with a veil in France, then there is a problem. Why there is a problem? Because we go back to the religious definition of citizenship. And we go back to communitarianism. How do you say it? Yes, Italianism. Because community becomes an ideological system. an ideological manifestation in the public space. I am here, I'm different from you, I stand in front of you as different from you, and of course, when I say this, you will do the same. You cannot just stand there and I accept this. Then we come back to religious wars like Europe had in 16th century. This is the stake. It is not because the rule of law wants to put a restriction on the right for having a religion. No. It is the necessity to avoid, to see communities becoming ideological strongholds in the society, generating wars between themselves. And this is what is happening in European societies since we have especially many Muslims who are wanting to manifest their belonging to Islam, and even they are asking, for example, to have special court for Muslims in Europe. So you see all the problems it raises and all the conflicts which are raised when a rule of law, of course, wants to remain a rule of law. It doesn't want to oppress or to suppress or to make restrictions. But it needs another education, another explanation for this kind of reactivation of the religious definition of belonging in the space of citizenship. This reactivation of ancient problems, of course, is due to two things. There are two responsibilities. The responsibility from the side of European experience and European conception of democracy and the rule of law. It is true historically that secularized reason, which is the reason of enlightenment, had a definition of religion which is too much restrictive, by saying that religion should be a private affair. It cannot come to the public space. And in some countries in Europe, religion, for example, no, not religion, excuse me, the compared history of religions is not taught in the schools. So religion becomes a domain which is not studied. It is studied among specialists, but for the citizens, there is no explanation of what religion is about, how a religion functions. So people are illiterate about religion as a social force, a political force which exists in the society. This is a shortcoming from the side of democracies and European style of creating a civil society. You might tell, for example, that in England, religion is taught at schools. It's taught at universities. But how is it taught at universities? Is it taught in a comparative way to show how Islam, Judaism, Christianity, for example, in the Mediterranean area, developed on the same symbolic basis, religious symbolic basis, and you show this through a comparative presentation of the three religions, or you bring a professor for Islam, a professor for Catholics, a professor for Buddhism, and this one tells his story about these people, and that's it. The stronghold is there. You show how the stronghold is built, but you don't explain what's the function of this stronghold in the society, in a civil society, where people are entitled to claim rights. So there is a problem here. which is, in my view, for Muslim societies, for Muslim context, a key. Because Muslims not only they do not teach in schools history of religions, not only they don't do this, they ignore this discipline, which is essential to build a civil society. We cannot build a civil society without this cultural input in the society to change the way it functioned so far, according to this diagram, through oppression from the first line on the second line. We cannot do that. Not only history of religion is not taught, but how Islam is taught in Muslims, in schools, all schools, elementary schools, secondary schools, and universities in Muslim societies. How is it taught? In such a way that my religion is the best one. It is the true one. Your religion is not good. You have to change. Which is even less tolerance than what we had in the medieval ages. When what we had in classical Islam. Because in classical Islam, at least, the schools were debating among themselves. Theologians Mu'tazili, theologians Shi'i, theologians Sunni, were debating among themselves. Now there is no debate because all is commanded by the state. The new nation state is commanding and controlling the whole society and controlling, of course, the system of education, which is a big obstacle to the genesis and to the construction of a civil society in all contemporary Muslim contexts. So you see, there is still a lot to say, but I would like to insist on the fact that when we speak about civil society, we are obliged to use, as I did, all the conceptualization which comes from Europe, because Islamic thought didn't produce a conceptualization of a civil society. You can go to medieval ages and ask to all the philosophers, all the theologians, it is medieval ages. These ideas didn't exist in the medieval ages. They were thinking in a religious frame, in a theological frame, and people were looking to each other as a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew. They were not looking to each other as a citizen. Citizenship is a modern concept and a modern idea, implemented with a modern law. So we are obliged to go through the European conceptualization. But when we go through the European conceptualization, immediately Muslims would tell you, you are bringing to us all the stuff from Europe. And Europe is against us. They colonized us and all the... No. This is an enormous confusion. Because the debate should be on two levels. On the level of historical experience. As I told you, civil society and secularism in France is different from England, from Holland, from Norway, from etc. Because there is a background, cultural background there. This is the level of contingency. Each society has a dimension of contingency. But there is a second level of civil society, which is the level of philosophy of law concerning human person, wherever a human person is living, where whatever is the society in which a human person is living. Modern law is concerned about human person, especially today, with the biological problems, which are raised about the integrity of human person. So now we are required to think on another level than the national level, to build a civil society for my national home. It's not enough. We did this so far. Now we have to think on civil society on the philosophical level, concerning human being as a human being, who is threatened in its integrity as a human being. So this time he is in danger not because of political ideologies, the pressure of the state, etc., because of scientific discoveries, because of biology and the status of human person. So we require another thinking, another definition of a law, and all governments, you see, they have all created an ethical council for biological sciences, all of them. You see what is happening. So this is a new challenge, larger than all the challenges we had, which is adding new obstacles and new problems, and unfortunately in Muslim context, every time we have new challenges, we accumulate challenges, and we discover that we did nothing to answer to the previous challenges. So we are accumulating challenges, contemplating it, and using the European conceptualization in a very wrong, unsatisfying way. Thank you.